wanting to do a video about wovens for a while, and I'm really excited to be doing it with such a beautiful line of fabric that I just got sent from Fableism. This line is called the Lucky Loom. I'm really excited to be playing with these and for the chance to talk a little bit about sewing and quilting with woven fabrics instead of quilting cottons and why I love them, and some tips that I recommend you keep in mind if you're going to make a quilt with wovens, because there are a few things I would say will make your journey of making a quilt with wovens a lot more enjoyable than if you just kind of did the same thing that you do with quilting cottons. Quilting cottons are generally kind of like the entry-level fabric you're going to make a quilt with. If you go to a quilt shop, that's going to be most of what you find is quilting cottons. I don't know why I can't say that. Quilting cottons. Working with wovens is a little bit different. There are a few different tips that I kind of follow when I'm doing that, that I think if you haven't tried it yet, you may want to try some of these tips that will make your quilt a lot more enjoyable to make, but also a lot more beautiful for the long haul. Okay, so one of the things that I really like about wovens over quilting cottons is how soft they are. The weave is just a little bit looser. The thread count typically is a little bit lower. And so those two things combined create a quilt that is just a little bit more broken down right off the bat than a quilt with a tighter weave quilting cotton. And it just makes it feel a lot more inviting and snuggly and cozy and all the things that I want my quilts to be. I always say I am not an artist quilter. I am a utility quilter. So most of my designs are with the idea of like, where am I going to drape this in mind? Who needs this to wrap up with? What will it look like on the end of a sofa or on the bed, or, fill in the blank. But it rarely is that I'm approaching quilting as an artist who wants to put this on a wall, or it's so intricate that I don't really want to use it. I just want it to feel like something that is like a hug when I'm not there, right? Like that's kind of my intent, to make something beautiful that reminds somebody that they are loved. And so I really love a cozy quilt. Ones that don't turn out cozy can kind of feel a little bit like, oh, what was the point to me because of my goal? So I think recognizing and thinking about what is my goal with making a quilt is always a good idea, and it can change from quilt to quilt. You may want mostly utility quilts and then to make something that's super complex, and that's great. I tend towards a cozy. It's like why I love quilting. So I really like to use wovens over quilting cottons for that reason. I even like, if I'm going to use quilting cottons, to incorporate some wovens with it because it softens the overall quilt. So that's a whole different video of how to make the softest quilt possible. But this video, I want to talk specifically about why wovens, how to work with them, and how to not lose your mind in the process. I'm going to go bit by bit. I have this collection of 21 fat quarters. So I will show you what I do before I cut. I'm going to be using my new pattern Geraldine. And I actually am going to, instead of using it purely as fat quarters, I'm actually going to use them as fat eighths and do more fabric because I kind of want to use all of these. And what that does is enables me, if I start with a throw and I decide I want this on my bed, then I can use all of the fat quarters and make a bed size, like a full queen. So I kind of really want to do that, but I have a lot going on in my life right now, so we'll see. But this will get me started. And then you can see this has sashing and large squares, so that's what these fabrics are for. I think the blue is going to be the big large square, and this like white with gray grid will be the sashing, but TBD. I kind of need to see the 9 patches come together, and then I will be able to decide that. But that's what I'm going to be making in the process. I'm really excited. I haven't made one of these in a while. I made my first one in March. I got it all written and edited and printed, and then it's just kind of, I've been waiting to share it. And so when these came in, I was like, I get to make a Geraldine. I'm so excited. So that's what I'm going to be making in the process. But the tips that I give work for whatever quilt you want to make with wovens. So these are just my favorites. I am a largely self-taught quilter, so but I have been quilting for, I mean, almost 20 years now. And so I do not at all think of myself as an expert, but I do have some tips that I know could have helped me during my first woven quilt. So yeah, I'm super excited. Let's get started. This is going to be a really lovely quilt. The colors alone make me know it's going to be beautiful. So I'm excited to get to film the process and kind of take you guys along with me this week. So let's do it. Okay, so a few tips that I want to give on prepping woven fabrics for a quilt are, I never pre-wash. I think that I like to save any of the shrinkage for after the quilt is made. I think that's what creates a lot of the wonderful crinkle that I'm actually going for. And so I don't want to lose that on the front end. I do like to starch my wovens before I cut them. So you definitely want to make sure you don't starch your pieces you've already cut, because that can cause them to kind of draw up a little bit. But if you do it before you cut, then you're cutting your pieces you've cut haven't changed size at all. So I'm going to go through here and starch and press each of these. I've gotten about halfway through the stack. I'm just using a very basic spray starch. It's the one that I grew up with my mom using on my dad's shirts. So it's just like you buy it at the grocery store. And I really like that. I feel like I don't want to add an extra trip to my life for something like starch if I can help it. So I don't use any of the specialty like starches you can find at a quilt shop or garment shop. I'm sure they're wonderful. It's just not super easy for me to get to one of those. And I guess I haven't fallen in love with enough with any of them to like make sure I have them on hand. So I'm usually in a place where I've run out and I need it quickly, and my grocery store is like, I'm probably already going, to be honest. So it's just easier for me to use this, regular old starch. So I'm going to go through and finish up all of these, and then hopefully I'll get to a little bit of cutting today. This pattern is super basic, but to cut, but I have a sick child home, and I want to make sure I'm attentive to that and not getting too distracted in here. So I may not get as much done as I planned, but that is totally fine. I'll just kind of work in little gaps as I have moments. So on my last one, there's no real special tip on cutting with wovens anyways, but I do want to show you the next step of piecing with them and what's important there. So day this is, maybe day 3 of this process of working with wovens. We've prepped and cut our fabric. And the tip that I have when you're piecing with wovens is that you're going to really want to shorten your stitch length. Typically in quilting, just in general, it's a good idea to sew with a shorter stitch length. So if you're sewing a garment and you're starting and stopping like a seam, they always tell you to back stitch at the beginning and end. And you can still do that with quilting to like make sure those ends don't start coming unraveled. But the problem with quilting is that if you like, a lot of times a method might include like sewing a big long strip. Even if you back stitch at the end, if you then cut that big long strip into smaller pieces, those edges haven't been back stitched. So the way to keep those from falling apart is to sew at a shorter stitch length. I recommend for piecing to shorten it to 1.8 to 2.0. Now, some people I know even will shorten that even more for wovens. I've heard people say that they go down to 1.0. I have not done that, but that could be something you need to experiment to make sure your seams are staying tight, because you certainly don't want to do all that work. Wovens can be a little bit, because they're looser, it can be a little bit more apt to getting holes in them. So we don't want that, and it's possible to avoid it, but that's the biggest sewing tip I have, is to make sure you shorten your stitch length. Experiment a little bit and see what is best for you. Wovens can also be one thing some patterns will call for is a scant 1/4 inch seam. So in quilting we sew with a 1/4 inch seam. Scant just means just a smidge under. I would, especially if you have not sewn with wovens before, I would exercise extreme caution using a pattern like that for your first go at quilting with wovens, because that just means this little seam allowance is going to be even thinner than a 1/4 inch, which is already not a ton. And I just think maybe don't start there. I'm not saying at all that you can't do it. I've seen amazing quilts made with wovens with a scant 1/4 inch seam, but I would encourage you to be a little careful for your first one. And then the other thing I would say is in some ways, the actual sewing can be a little bit like wonkier. But it also, because of that, it's also like, in a sense, a little bit more forgiving. So there's something about the blend of it being like looser and a little bit more free flow that also works really well for like, it's gonna work out in the end. I don't know. I just love sewing with them. So I'm probably biased, but I do feel like they can be more difficult to sew with and also more forgiving in the end. So anyways, I've got a whole stack of these. I'm going to see what I can get done. I've got a dentist appointment for my daughter to get to here in a bit. So I'm going to sit and crank out some 9 patches, and I'll see what tips I have as I go. If there's anything that comes to mind, I'll pause and let you know. So let's do this. So I've made 9 of these 9 patch blocks. As I've been going, I think that I've covered everything that I would say to you about sewing with wovens, but if you have questions, please feel free to drop them in the comments. I know there are things that at this point I probably do without thinking a lot about that you could have a question about, so please ask and I'll do my best to get to those in an efficient manner. I hope you try it. Geraldine is a great pattern to try this for, but there's so many great patterns out there. I have free patterns on my website as well that would be great to try working with wovens as well. So give it a go and let me know how it goes. So thanks for being here today.